Hey guys, Dan Holland here from SolutionToolbox.com. Welcome back. This is part 3 in our series of creating a website from start to finish using Site Builder. So far we have created our layout, we have mapped the zones, and in this video we are going to start the CSS that we need to get everything laid out correctly on the screen. So we can see here we're on the layout editor, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up top here to the site settings and resources, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the CSS manager. This will open a window for us, and we can see that we don't have any CSS files, but we're going to create one. So if we click the Add New CSS File, go ahead and give it a name here. We'll call this Default CSS. You can call it whatever you like. Give it a description. I'm going to go ahead and select the Create File button here. And now we can see we have a file in here. Now there's two ways we can get started with CSS. First, for designers who aren't familiar with CSS, if you click on the designer link here, we can build CSS styles visually, which is going to be the easiest for everyone out there who doesn't know CSS. So let me show you this real quick. For the first style that I want to create is the body style, and that allows us to style the HTML element body tag. And the first thing I want to do is turn off the paddings and margins for our website so we don't have a nice white border all the way around. So to do that, I need to set the paddings and margins for the body. So I'm going to go ahead and click on body here. And then I'm going to click on Add Style. And now we can see that we have a body element over here on the right hand side. If we click on that, this will open up the designer for us. So there's a couple things we can set, from font settings to block elements to background borders, how it's positioned on the screen, paddings and margins. So what we're going to do is come in here and we can set all these paddings to 0 pixels. And then we can do the same thing over here for the margins. We can set these. And if we click down here on the refresh code, we can see that it automatically generates some of this code here for us. And then if we go ahead and update this class, we can build all of our classes through here visually. Now this was an HTML element, but I can also add custom classes by typing in a name here, or I can also create CSS selectors down here. Now me personally, I like to do all of my CSS the old school way, and that's writing my own. So if I close this window here, and I just click on the open link, this will just open a text editor where I can write all my styles from scratch. So let's go ahead and get started. On this body tag, we wanted to set the paddings and margins to 0, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Say padding, it's going to be 0 pixels, and the margin also set to 0 pixels. Alright. So the very next thing that I want to do is, let me bring this over here. The effect that I'm going for on this website is I want all my content centered in the middle, but at the same time I want the website to stretch to the screen resolution of whoever's viewing the site. So if their resolution is at 1024, I want it to be the full screen. If they're also at 1600 wide, I want it still to be full screen. In order to get that effect, I have to have background images that scroll all the way across, but I still want to keep my content in the center. So to do that, I'm going to create a CSS div that's always centered on the screen, and that's always the width of my main site, which is going to be 976 pixels here, which I can get if I look at the original template that I have. You can basically measure from one side of this to the other, and that's how you'd get your width. So I'm going to come in here, we'll call this main div, and because this is a class, I'm going to start it with a dot. And we're going to come down here and say, let's see, this is going to be the margin. We're going to set this to 0 space auto. Now this is some shorthand CSS, but basically what this does is it centers the div on the screen for us. And the next thing we're going to do is tell it how wide we need to be, which is going to be the 976 pixels. So just like that, we're done with our main div. Now the next thing that I want to do is, let's pull this designer back open here. Then look at the divs that I had outlined. So the first thing that I can see is this outer one here. This is going to surround my header area. And if we look at the original template, zoom this back out, delete some of these, we can see there's also a background image that goes all the way across back here. So I want to set this information up. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this, we'll call this outer header. Of course we need to put a dot in front of it. And we'll come down here, and the first thing I want to do is set the width, which is going to be 100%. That way it's always full screen. the next thing that I'm going to do is set the height. And that's going to be 142 pixels. I measured that beforehand, but basically if you come in here, you can measure this distance right here, which will give you the 142 pixels. The next thing that I'm going to set is going to be the background image. And that is going to be and we'll call this header BG. Now I know I typed a bunch of code in here, but basically when you upload files to SiteBuilder, they're going to be stored in a specific file, and that file is going to be /data/SiteBuilder/uploaded files. Now if you're using the visual editor to design your CSS, you don't have to worry about this because it automatically fills it in. But if you are doing it from scratch, just remember /data/SiteBuilder/uploaded files, and then of course your file name. So we have our image in there for the background, but I also want to tell it to repeat this image across the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it to do background repeat, and we'll say repeat horizontally. Okay. The next thing that I want to do is I want to add some space, because if we look at the original image, we can see that all my content here isn't right up against the top. There's a little bit of padding here. It's about 40 pixels, so I'm going to go ahead and add that in here. Just like that. We were finished with the outer header. So let's take a look back here at our layout. So we have this area here. We already have the main div area, which is around it, centering it in the center. The next thing we have to worry about are these two individual ones, since they're going to go right next to each other. So this is the logo area, and this is the dynamic menu area. So let's go ahead and create our styles for that. So we're going to call this, call it logo placeholder. And our logo, we need to set the width, which is 180 pixels. And then we also need to set the floating, because we want these two divs to be next to each other. And by default, divs are block elements, so they're going to be underneath each other. But if we go ahead and tell it to float to the left, this will allow them to be next to each other. So below that, we're going to create our menu placeholder. And in here, we're going to tell it the width of the menu. Width I've already measured, and it is approximately 776 pixels. And as with the logo, I'm going to tell this one to float to the right, so these two divs can be next to each other. And that will finish up that area there. So if we switch back here, now we're done with this area. So let's go ahead and move on to our image rotator and our jQuery rotator. So I'm going to create one called outer rotator. Just like that. And what do we need here? Well, the width is going to be 100% because this is going to stretch all the way across. And then we also need a height here. And that I already measured, and it's going to be 339 pixels. Next, we're going to need our background image, and I'm just going to save myself some time, and I'm going to copy it from up here. So, the background image, we're just going to change it from header BG. We're going to call this one rotator BG. Now, these are images that I've already created on the backside. That's why I know the names. Yours might be a little different. Once again, this will repeat horizontally. And let's see. That's all we need there for that one. Now we already did the inner div, so this area is done. Now the next one, the jQuery rotator and the main content area, are contained within the same background color. We can see here that they're kind of on this metallic background. So I just need to create one for those. So I'm going to go ahead and call this the outer content. And let's go ahead and set the width of this, once again, to 100%. And we're going to go ahead and set the height to 400. pixels. That's a good starting point. We can always expand from there. And then we need to do the background information, so I'm going to copy this again, save myself some time. This time the data is going to be called metalbg. And this time, instead of just repeating in the X direction, this data could, this area here, since it's our content, could be smaller and larger depending on the page. So I actually want to repeat in both directions. So I'm just going to tell it to repeat. All right, close that up there. And then finally, we just have the footer down here at the bottom. Put this back up here. So we just have the footer area. So we'll go ahead and create outer footer. And once again, we need a width 100%. We need a height of 59 pixels because I already measured it. And then we're going to need the background information. Paste that in here. This is called footer BG. And this one we only want to repeat horizontally because the footer will be a fixed height. And then we should be all set. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Update CSS. Close that. You can close this. And then if over here on my editor, if I click the Refresh CSS button, I should see my new CSS pop open and I can see all of my classes available here.